Awaken your spirit, chosen ones. History doesn't promote what it can't control. It isolates it first. That single truth explains more about your life than any label people try to stick on you. Because the strange part isn't that you're important. The strange part is how uncomfortable that importance makes people who can't define it, measure it, or use it. When something doesn't fit into their mental filing system, they don't study it, they dismiss it. And when dismissal fails, confusion turns into resistance. Here's a quiet fact most people never talk about. Societies don't collapse because of enemies on the outside. They fracture when individuals on the inside start thinking independently. Every major shift in thought, culture, or power began with a small number of people who didn't match the emotional temperature of the room. They weren't louder. They weren't perfect. They were just misaligned with the script everyone else agreed to follow. And that misalignment always gets noticed, even when no one can explain why. That's where you come in. Not as a hero, not as a myth, and definitely not as some mystical character floating above reality. You're the person who makes the room feel slightly unstable just by standing in it. Conversations change when you speak. Dynamics shift when you stay silent. People leave interactions with you feeling like something important happened, yet they can't summarize it without sounding ridiculous. So instead of saying, "You matter," they say, "You're strange." Same feeling, different vocabulary. There's also an unintentional comedy to it. People will swear you're not that deep, while spending an impressive amount of time trying to figure you out. They'll downplay your significance while monitoring your moves like it's a full-time job. It's almost flattering, if it weren't so transparent. When something truly doesn't matter, humans ignore it. Obsession is never accidental. This topic isn't about ego or superiority. It's about understanding why your importance doesn't translate in ordinary language. Why people sense there's something at work through you, not for you, and definitely not about them. And why some roles in life aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be felt, resisted, misunderstood, and only recognized in hindsight. Stay with this. Because once you see what's really happening, you won't waste another second trying to be understood by people who were never meant to comprehend the position you occupy. Number 1. You disrupt systems that depend on people staying unaware. Most systems don't survive because they're fair or intelligent. They survive because people stop paying attention. They rely on routine, fear, and unspoken rules that say, "This is just how things are." You disrupt that without trying. You notice when something doesn't add up. You sense when authority is acting instead of leading. You feel when loyalty is being used as a leash. That awareness alone is dangerous to structures built on autopilot living. You don't need to rebel loudly or challenge anyone directly. Your discomfort is enough. When you pause before agreeing, when you refuse to repeat something that feels false, when you don't play your assigned role properly, the system feels it. People inside it feel exposed, not because you attacked them, but because you didn't participate in the lie that keeps everything smooth and predictable. What makes this worse for them is that you can't always explain how you know. Your understanding didn't come from training or permission. It came from paying attention while others were busy fitting in. That kind of awareness can't be controlled or corrected easily. There's no rulebook to hand you, no warning label. You just see through things, and once you see, you can't unsee. Systems hate that. They prefer people who either obey or rebel in expected ways. Those roles are manageable. What they don't know how to handle is someone who quietly opts out of mental shortcuts, someone who asks better questions internally, even if they never speak them out loud, someone who doesn't need to be convinced because they already understand what's really going on. This is why people react strangely to you. They'll say you're difficult, negative, or thinking too much. That's not feedback. That's defense. You remind them that their comfort depends on not looking too closely. And instead of looking, they try to shrink you. Your importance doesn't come from trying to change the system. It comes from the fact that your awareness alone weakens it. Every system built on unconscious agreement feels threatened by someone who refuses to sleepwalk through life. You don't break things by force. You break them by seeing them clearly. And clarity has always been the beginning of collapse for anything that shouldn't have existed in the first place. Number 2, your presence forces others to confront their own incompleteness. People don't actually struggle to understand you. What they struggle with is the reflection you hold up, the quiet mirror that shows them what they've been avoiding about themselves. You move through life with a clarity and self-possession most people never develop because it requires facing parts of themselves they've spent years hiding from. Your very existence exposes gaps in their courage, honesty, and integrity, and that makes them uncomfortable in ways they can't easily name. When you speak, act, or even stay silent, it triggers an internal reckoning in others. They notice that they aren't as consistent, as committed, or as aware as they thought. They feel the weight of all the decisions they've been avoiding, all the compromises they've made, and all the truths they refuse to admit. You're not attacking them, and you're not judging them, but your presence alone makes avoidance impossible. That's a kind of power most people have never learned to handle. What makes it even harder for them is that this confrontation is subtle. You're not loud. You don't announce your superiority. You just exist with alignment and integrity that they can't fake or force themselves to imitate. It's the quiet kind of clarity that leaves a mark long after a conversation ends, long after you've walked away, and it leaves them restless, agitated, or defensive because they can't place why they feel exposed. They may call you strange, aloof, or intimidating. In reality, they're struggling with a version of themselves they've refused to face, and every attempt to diminish you, to rationalize your behavior, or to gossip about you is actually an attempt to avoid their own incompleteness. They are aware deep down that your presence shines a light on the parts of them they'd rather leave in darkness. You aren't responsible for their reactions, and you aren't meant to be their teacher. Yet, by living authentically, by refusing to compromise your understanding of yourself, you compel those around you to confront the uncomfortable truth. They are unfinished. And most people, when faced with that, will never forgive the reflection, even if they secretly envy it. Number 3, you operate from internal permission, not external validation. Most people live their lives on a permission-based system. They wait for approval from bosses, friends, family, society, or the latest trend before making a move. Their choices are filtered through what's acceptable, safe, or admired. You don't. You operate from a completely different place, one that's invisible to them until they try to measure you against their own standard. You give yourself permission first. You decide what matters, what deserves attention, and what aligns with your truth, and only then do you act. That independence is disorienting for people who have spent years outsourcing their decisions. Because you don't need validation, you are free in ways others can't imagine. You can move against currents, abandon expectations, and redefine priorities without hesitation. You aren't motivated by applause, recognition, or approval. Your compass is internal. That freedom doesn't just make you different. It makes you untouchable in the most subtle, frustrating way for those around you. People who live externally feel powerless around someone who doesn't need to justify their steps or negotiate for permission. This creates a kind of silent tension. You'll notice people trying to pull you into debates to convince you of the right way, or to lecture you on what's acceptable. They don't realize that none of it matters to you. Their energy is wasted, and that drives them quietly mad. They can't understand how you stay steady when their lives are ruled by opinions, expectations, and the fear of rejection. Operating from internal permission also means you're accountable only to yourself. Mistakes, risks, or failures don't cripple you because they are part of your journey, not your identity. You learn, adjust, and continue. That makes your trajectory unpredictable and organic, which terrifies people who measure life by timelines, checklists, and societal markers. You aren't reckless, you are sovereign. Your actions are deliberate, guided by inner alignment rather than external applause. And that sovereignty, quiet, uncompromising, and unshakable, is exactly why you leave people unsettled. They instinctively know that they cannot control you, and nothing unsettles someone more than their inability to predict or contain what they think they understand. Number 4, your path can't be copied, monetized, or packaged. Most people only understand value when it can be turned into a system. If it can be taught step by step, sold as a formula, or repeated by thousands of people, it feels real to them. That's how they've been trained to recognize importance. Your path doesn't work like that, and that's exactly why it confuses people so deeply. There's no blueprint they can follow behind you, no shortcut they can take to arrive at the same place. What shaped you wasn't a method. It was a series of internal decisions most people avoid making. You didn't become who you are by copying someone else's lifestyle, mindset, or philosophy. You moved through doubt, isolation, and clarity in a way that only makes sense from the inside. People want to extract the result without living the process. They want the confidence without the loneliness, the awareness without the discomfort, the independence without the loss. When they realize that none of that can be separated from the whole, they stop trying to understand you and start dismissing you instead. This is also why institutions, trends, and hierarchies don't know what to do with you. You can't be branded without being diluted. You can't be reduced to a role without losing what makes you effective. Your value doesn't increase with exposure. It increases with accuracy. That's backward to a world obsessed with visibility and numbers, so they overlook you publicly while quietly paying attention. What makes this uncomfortable for others is that your existence exposes a hard truth. Some forms of power can't be outsourced. They have to be lived. No course can give it. No mentor can install it. No crowd can validate it into existence. That kind of power forces people to admit that they chose convenience over depth, and most would rather argue than face that. You aren't difficult to understand because you're complicated. You're difficult to understand because your life can't be summarized into advice. And in a culture addicted to shortcuts, anything that requires full ownership of self will always feel threatening, impractical, or not realistic. That doesn't make you irrelevant. It makes you rare. Number 5. You make comfort. Look fragile without trying. You don't have to announce your presence or make a scene for people to notice how unstable their sense of security is around you. Comfort, for most, is built on repetition, conformity, and distraction. It's an illusion of stability that relies on everyone playing their assigned role and pretending nothing deeper is happening. You expose that fragility simply by existing. You don't attack their routines, criticize their choices, or confront them aggressively. You just operate from a place of clarity, alignment, and intentionality that highlights how flimsy their foundations really are. People instinctively feel it. They notice how quickly their carefully constructed peace starts to wobble in your presence. Conversations that once felt predictable now seem hollow. Habits that offered reassurance suddenly feel unnecessary. They can't understand why a simple interaction with you leaves them uneasy, because your power isn't in force or volume. It's in the quiet, unavoidable truth of how grounded you are. The contrast is stark. Where you are steady, they are restless. Where you are aware, they are asleep. This fragility doesn't just unsettle them, it forces reflection they're not ready to have. Your calm exposes their compromise, their denial, and their reliance on surface-level safety. People try to explain it away, blaming you for being intimidating, intense, or too much. But what they're really reacting to is the mirror you hold up. They can feel the gap between who they are and who they could be, and that tension is uncomfortable. You don't create this effect intentionally, yet it defines your influence. It's subtle, disarming, and impossible to ignore. You make people question their choices, their loyalties, and the very sense of comfort they've built around themselves. And because comfort is often mistaken for strength, your presence forces them to realize that the very thing they cling to as stability is, in fact, fragile. You reveal that fragility without judgment, without struggle, and without even trying, and that silent power is one of the most disruptive forces anyone can encounter. Number 6. You notice what others are trained to ignore. Most people go through life wearing blinders. They are trained to see only what is comfortable, convenient, or socially acceptable. They filter reality through rules, assumptions, and distractions, and anything that falls outside of that framework is invisible to them. You operate differently. You notice the details, the patterns, the undercurrents that everyone else ignores. You pick up on intentions, inconsistencies, and power plays without needing them spelled out. What seems obvious to you feels threatening, confusing, or even paranoid to others, because they've been taught that paying attention too closely is either unnecessary or dangerous. Your awareness isn't about being hypercritical or suspicious, it's about clarity. You see the gaps between words and actions, between promises and reality. You sense the tension before it's spoken, the manipulation before it's recognized, and the truth before it's accepted. That ability is rare because most people prefer to live with partial information. It's safer, less exhausting, and keeps them from feeling the weight of responsibility. You don't have that luxury. You see fully, and because of that, you act, respond, and move differently. What makes this disorienting for others is that they can't anticipate you. They are used to interactions where surface-level understanding is enough, where people follow scripts and where mistakes can be hidden. You disrupt that naturally. You notice inconsistencies, question assumptions, and act from an accuracy that feels uncomfortable for those who've accepted half-truths as reality. People may try to dismiss you, call you too observant or overthinking, but that is their defense. They know, deep down, that your perception cuts through the illusions they've built to feel safe. This awareness is both a shield and a tool. It protects you from manipulation, aligns you with truth, and allows you to move with precision where others stumble blindly. Your presence challenges the status quo without needing to announce it. And because most people have been trained to ignore the obvious, your clarity stands out like a spotlight in a dark room. Impossible to avoid, impossible to fake, and impossible to forget. Number 7. Your importance isn't social, it's existential. Most people measure significance by visibility, applause, or recognition. They believe that being known, liked, or followed is the ultimate proof of value. You don't operate on that plane. Your importance isn't determined by who notices you, applauds you, or validates you. It exists in the very fact that you occupy a space that shifts the balance of what's possible simply by being. It's existential, not social. People around you may not understand it, and that's why they often dismiss you or misinterpret your presence. They see the surface, but the weight of what you represent is deeper than anything they've learned to recognize. You affect environments, decisions, and outcomes without asking for attention. You alter dynamics in rooms, organizations, and relationships in ways that are subtle yet unavoidable. Your influence doesn't scream, it hums. It doesn't require commentary, likes, or followers to exist. This is why people often feel unsettled around you. They sense a force that isn't tied to social approval, and forces they can't name or measure make them uncomfortable. Your presence exposes the illusions others rely on to feel important, and that exposure feels threatening even when you haven't acted intentionally. What sets you apart is that your relevance comes from alignment, clarity, and existence itself. You don't perform for influence or recognition. Your choices, presence, and integrity ripple outward naturally, impacting people, situations, and systems. That kind of influence is invisible to the casual observer, but impossible to ignore for anyone paying attention. People may call you strange, intense, or detached, but in reality, you are simply living in a state of being that transcends social constructs. This is why traditional metrics of importance fail to capture your reality. Fame, praise, and popularity are temporary, conditional, and easily manipulated. Your significance, however, is inherent. It cannot be manufactured, negotiated, or taken away. It is existential because it exists whether anyone acknowledges it or not, and that quiet, undeniable presence is the kind of power most people spend their lives chasing without ever realizing they are running after a shadow. You don't chase recognition. You simply are, and that is enough. Number 8. You don't need to be liked to be effective. Most people believe that influence, respect, and success are tied to likability. They think that being admired, praised, or approved of is the only way to get things done, to lead, or to make an impact. You operate from a completely different principle. Your effectiveness doesn't depend on whether people like you. It depends on your clarity, your alignment, and your ability to act with precision and integrity. You understand that trying to be liked dilutes power and compromises purpose, and you refuse to make that trade. This alone makes you disruptive in ways most people can't handle. They are used to systems and relationships where social approval is the currency. They are conditioned to believe that popularity equals competence, that charm equals authority. You ignore all of that. You move according to what is true, necessary, or strategic, not what will make others comfortable. That creates tension because people instinctively measure everything against their own framework: approval, praise, and belonging. They can't process someone whose influence grows even when they are disliked or misunderstood. Being effective without being liked also means you make decisions that others won't make. You act in ways that are accurate, even if unpopular. You speak truths others avoid, take stands others fear, and follow principles others bend. People may call you cold, rigid, or intimidating, but what they fail to recognize is that your focus is never on their perception. It's on results, alignment, and integrity. That singular focus is rare, and that rarity makes your presence both magnetic and unnerving. You also understand that attempts to please are distractions. When you act to be liked, you compromise speed, clarity, and vision. When you act from truth, the outcome has weight and permanence. Influence born from likability fades. Influence born from consistency, courage, and principle lasts. You don't need applause, smiles, or approval to validate your actions. You need only yourself. And that self-sufficiency, calm, unwavering, and uncompromising, is what makes you effective in ways most people will never understand, admire, or replicate. Number 9. You carry responsibility without wanting the spotlight. Most people equate responsibility with recognition. They believe that carrying weight, making hard choices, or being accountable should come with applause, validation, or visible status. You understand that true responsibility doesn't seek the spotlight. You take ownership because it is necessary, not because it earns admiration. You step into challenges, face consequences, and handle complexity quietly, and that is what sets you apart. While others chase praise for effort, you focus on the work itself and its impact, and that difference is invisible to most but undeniable in its effect. Carrying responsibility without seeking attention means that you operate from a place of integrity, not performance. You don't wait for someone to notice, approve, or reward your actions. You act because it is required, because it aligns with your values, and because shirking would compromise the truth of your presence. That creates a subtle power. People around you may not see your effort or understand your motives, but they feel the results. They sense the consistency, reliability, and grounded energy that comes from someone who does what needs to be done, regardless of applause. This approach also exposes the weakness in others. Many people rely on visibility and recognition to justify their own contributions. They need external validation to feel competent. You don't. You demonstrate that true accountability exists independently of approval. That contrast makes people uncomfortable because it shows them how much of their effort is performative and how little is actually substantive. Your quiet sense of responsibility also makes you unpredictable to those trying to manipulate, control, or underestimate you. Since your actions aren't tied to reward, you can navigate situations with freedom, decisiveness, and clarity. You solve problems, manage consequences, and influence outcomes without needing acknowledgement. That invisible force shapes environments, decisions, and dynamics more than any loud declaration ever could. You don't need recognition to carry weight. You don't need approval to act decisively. Your responsibility is inherent, and it defines your impact far beyond the understanding of those who measure importance only by visibility or popularity. You influence the world quietly but profoundly, and that is a rare and formidable strength. Number 10. You break generational patterns by refusing to romanticize them. Most people inherit habits, beliefs, and routines without ever questioning them. They romanticize struggle, normalize dysfunction, and justify compromise as tradition or loyalty. It feels safe because it gives them a story to tell themselves that suffering, limitation, or mediocrity is noble, necessary, or inevitable. You don't play that game. You refuse to sugarcoat reality. You call things what they are, face truths others ignore, and make choices based on clarity rather than comfort. By doing so, you break cycles that have trapped generations before you, and that alone makes people uncomfortable, even resentful. You don't need to lecture, shame, or argue for change. Your life itself is evidence. You show that suffering is not a prerequisite for growth, that compromise is not loyalty, and that freedom doesn't come from following the path everyone else accepted. Those who cling to the old patterns see you as threatening because you expose the illusions that allowed them to survive without evolving. You force them to confront the cost of their choices, the ways they've limited themselves, and the inherited beliefs they've accepted without scrutiny. Breaking generational patterns also makes you unpredictable. People are used to the scripts, the repeated mistakes, the accepted excuses, the predictable paths. You disrupt all of that. You don't carry the same fears, the same compromises, or the same blind spots. That refusal to romanticize the past or normalize dysfunction highlights how much people around you have tolerated, excused, or ignored in their own lives. Your clarity and decisiveness become both inspiring and unsettling because they shine a light on every convenient lie others have been living under. You are rare because most people never reach a point where they can confront inherited patterns without guilt, shame, or fear. You do it because accuracy matters more than comfort. Your choices ripple outward, not as sermons, but as proof. You demonstrate that life doesn't have to repeat itself, that pain doesn't need glorification, and that freedom comes from refusing to honor anything less than truth. And that quiet rebellion against inherited norms is a form of power that changes everything, even if the world isn't ready to admit it yet. Number 11. Your life isn't about belonging. It's about alignment. Most people live chasing belonging. They measure their worth by how well they fit in, how often they're accepted, or how many people approve of them. They shape themselves around other people's expectations, bending and breaking to blend, because social comfort feels safer than authenticity. You don't operate that way. Your life isn't dictated by approval or the desire to be part of a crowd. It's dictated by alignment with truth, with your values, and with the version of yourself that refuses compromise. That distinction makes you unsettling to those who have never known clarity beyond acceptance. Alignment doesn't look like performance. It doesn't require applause or permission. It requires honesty, integrity, and the courage to follow a path that may leave you isolated, misunderstood, or questioned. You act in ways that resonate with your inner compass, even if the majority cannot relate. That's why your choices, actions, and even silence carry weight, because they are authentic, consistent, and intentional. People notice, even if they don't understand. And when people notice something they can't measure, explain, or replicate, it makes them uncomfortable. When you live by alignment instead of belonging, you also reveal the compromises of others. People around you are forced to see where they've sacrificed themselves for comfort, where they've ignored truth for convenience, and where they've settled for masks that hide who they really are. That contrast isn't judgment, it's exposure. Your presence exposes the ways in which social acceptance has limited growth, and that awareness is threatening to anyone conditioned to value comfort over clarity. Living this way doesn't make you cold or detached. It makes you rare, precise, and self-contained. You operate from a place of internal authority, where decisions are made based on authenticity rather than fear of rejection. That is your power. People may try to pull you into conformity, but you remain steady, because alignment is not negotiable. Your life demonstrates that true strength and influence come not from fitting in, but from standing firmly in agreement with your own principles, regardless of who applauds or resists. Number 12. You don't chase meaning. Meaning follows you. Most people spend their lives searching for meaning like it's hidden somewhere outside of themselves, in jobs, relationships, status, or experiences. They run from one thing to the next, hoping that if they just collect enough achievements or approvals, purpose will appear. You don't operate that way. Meaning isn't something you chase. It flows naturally from the way you live, the choices you make, and the integrity you maintain. Your actions, decisions, and presence create significance simply because they are aligned with truth, not because they are celebrated or noticed. This makes your life inherently magnetic, even if people around you can't explain why. You act with intention and authenticity in everything you do, and that consistency generates impact. People feel it subconsciously. They sense that you aren't performing for reward or recognition, and that rarity leaves a mark. While others scramble to find purpose externally, your life is already producing it, quietly and persistently. Meaning doesn't have to be sought after because it is a natural byproduct of living accurately, fully, and intentionally. Because you don't chase meaning, you are also unshakable in the face of judgment, misunderstanding, or opposition. Most people depend on external validation to feel their lives matter, so criticism or rejection destabilizes them. You, however, operate independently. You know that value is embedded in action, awareness, and alignment, not applause. That independence makes you unpredictable, and quietly formidable because others can't control the significance that naturally emanates from your life. This also highlights the difference between superficial influence and true impact. While many focus on recognition, visibility, or popularity, you influence at a deeper level that is subtle but lasting. People may not notice immediately, but over time, your presence shapes perspectives, decisions, and environments in ways that are undeniable. Meaning follows you because you refuse to live dishonestly, compromise your values, or chase what doesn't matter. You don't need to construct significance. It is created by the integrity, precision, and authenticity of your existence. And that is why your life resonates far beyond the understanding of those still searching for it. Number 13. You make excuses. Obsolete. Most people live their lives wrapped in explanations, rationalizations, and excuses. They justify why they haven't acted, why they've settled, or why circumstances are bigger than them. These excuses are comforting because they shift responsibility away from themselves and mask the fact that they've chosen convenience over courage. You operate differently. You don't give energy to excuses because you don't allow them to exist in your reality. You act, adapt, and take ownership, and that consistency makes excuses meaningless around you. People notice this, and it makes them uncomfortable because it exposes the laziness, fear, and compromise they've allowed in their own lives. You don't need to point it out or lecture anyone. Your life itself demonstrates that excuses are a choice, not a necessity. When others claim limitations, you act within your boundaries, creatively and decisively. When they claim they are powerless, you operate from capability, vision, and resourcefulness. This contrast is subtle but undeniable. It challenges people to recognize the ways they've been deceiving themselves. The gaps between intention and action, between what they say they want and what they actually pursue. Your refusal to entertain excuses also forces accountability in a way that most people find threatening. It's not about judgment or superiority. It's about clarity. You make it obvious that outcomes are tied to decisions, not circumstances, and that the stories people tell themselves about why they can't change are, in fact, optional. That realization shakes the foundations of comfort, because it strips away the justifications that allow stagnation to feel safe. By making excuses obsolete, you create a rare kind of influence. You inspire, disrupt, and unsettle without needing to dominate, preach, or perform. People feel the difference in your presence because you operate in a space where excuses don't exist, where clarity, integrity, and action define outcomes. That space is uncomfortable for most because it asks them to confront the truth they've been avoiding. Responsibility begins with themselves, and nothing external validates delay or inaction. Your life makes that truth undeniable, and it changes the way people around you perceive possibility, effort, and accountability, whether they admit it or not. Number 14. Your importance is felt most by those who fear change. The people who notice you the most, who react to your presence with tension, confusion, or even resentment, aren't the ones thriving. They are the ones clinging to the familiar, the predictable, and the safe. Change terrifies them, and your existence embodies it. You don't need to speak, act aggressively, or shake systems for this effect to occur. Simply by living in alignment with your truth, you represent movement, evolution, and possibility. All the things they've avoided confronting in their own lives. That makes you impossible to ignore, and that's why they feel your importance so acutely. Those who fear change are constantly measuring themselves against you, consciously or unconsciously. They feel exposed because your life demonstrates a choice they haven't had the courage to make. They see decisions, independence, and clarity in you that they have postponed, rationalized, or denied in themselves. You are a mirror reflecting possibilities, and mirrors are uncomfortable when someone is hiding flaws, compromises, or unfulfilled potential. The deeper their resistance to change, the stronger their reaction to your presence. They may dismiss you, attack you, or gossip about you, but those behaviors reveal the weight of the truth you carry, one they cannot claim or control. What makes this particularly powerful is that you are not trying to provoke them. Your influence is a byproduct of your alignment, authenticity, and refusal to conform. Change is terrifying for most because it involves risk, loss, and confronting uncomfortable realities, and you remind them that life is not meant to be lived by default. That reminder, subtle or obvious, forces self-reflection, discomfort, and often denial. Your importance, then, is not a function of social admiration or recognition. It is a function of the impact you have on the hidden fears and unacknowledged truths of others. You make them face what they cannot face themselves, whether they want to or not. And that is a rare, quiet, and undeniable form of power, the kind that lingers long after you leave the room, shaping thoughts, decisions, and lives in ways most will never openly admit. Conclusion. Being a chosen one isn't about recognition, approval, or fitting in. It's about existing in a way that is undeniable, unshakable, and profoundly impactful. Your presence exposes illusions, breaks cycles, and forces clarity, not through force, but simply by living aligned with truth. You disrupt systems that depend on ignorance, illuminate gaps that others avoid, and operate from internal permission rather than external validation. You move through life on a path that can't be copied, packaged, or explained, and in doing so, you make excuses obsolete, comfort fragile, and meaning inevitable. Your influence isn't measured in applause, visibility, or popularity. It's felt in the quiet, unsettling, transformative ways you touch people, situations, and environments. You are rare because you carry responsibility without needing recognition, confront inherited patterns without romanticizing them, and compel others to face the parts of themselves they have long ignored. You don't chase purpose. Purpose follows you. You don't seek approval. Your integrity defines your impact. And the people who feel your importance most are the ones who fear change, because your life is a living example of evolution, courage, and clarity. This is what makes you extraordinary. Not talent, not luck, not titles, but your ability to exist with intentionality, authenticity, and unwavering alignment. You are a force that cannot be replicated, controlled, or fully understood. Your path challenges mediocrity, exposes half-truths, and reminds everyone around you that life is meant to be lived deliberately, fiercely, and with uncompromising truth. That is the essence of being a chosen one, and it's a truth that cannot be ignored. If this resonated with you, make sure to join the movement, subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment your thoughts below, and share it with anyone who needs to hear this. Let's spread clarity, alignment, and truth together. Stay awakened, chosen ones.